So welcome to the Gift Club. I am joined by Craig Smith, who is a brand and digital specialist. In 2017, while at Ted Baker, Craig was given a critical task to turn up the volume of Ted Baker's digital and e-commerce proposition and set to work to successfully develop the digital business and increase it from 79 million to a huge 120 million. So I've pulled him in on here to spill the beans on how he did that. So it's really nice to have you, Craig. Thanks very much for joining me.
No, you're really welcome, and it's lovely to be asked to come and talk about it.
Okay. Many retailers, right, they should be investing time and money in the right places, Craig, but what should they be doing now to amplify their digital offering?
Really understanding the customer properly, first and foremost, and that's, do you understand the customer that you have? Do you understand the different groups of those customers? Do you understand, which customers are valuable and which are less valuable? And is that going to be, the proposition that you then develop upon and your understanding that you then take forward? And you start to then worry about the work you're going to do and how you're going to drive the value from that. And, first and foremost, you can talk about amplification, but what is it you're amplifying? What are the brand stories? What are the product stories? What are the calls to action that you are highlighting and, deploying across your various channels? And how do you go about constructing the right messages that resonate with, any one customer or any one customer group? So data and the way in which it's collected and, managed within a business is actually the differentiating factor between sort of success and failure in businesses right now. So, being a truly customer-centric business, it's easy to say, but it's actually a really hard thing to achieve. And it requires an enormous mental adjustment for most organisation, as it does really take away from that sort of siloed thinking of the old days. And it makes sure that all teams and all functions are really, navigating around the same and consistent set of KPIs. And that in itself is really important. And you can't really fake those things that the customers are telling you they feel strongly about and they feel less strongly about. And that's really important. You look at NPS score, it's actually quite a difficult thing to get a first view of, but those 100 or so metrics, when pulled together, give everyone in the business a really clear view of what your customers genuinely think about you and your brand and your business and the services and products you offer and the level of service and their expectations, et cetera, et cetera. And, Jeff Bezos apparently looks at it every morning and circulates his entire senior leadership team around, whether it goes up or down, good and bad. And he makes sure people understand the value of that. And I think is actually a really important point, because if it's working for a business like Amazon, then you know what? You'd be foolish to ignore the importance of it in any other business. But again, you can only draw that together as a consistent and cohesive view with the right data in the right place and looked at in the right way. So that's important. And then once you've managed to collate the data, let's call it, you bring your master data sets together into a data lake or whatever you want to describe it as, customer data platform. Once you've got a view there that people can make sense of and has been validated and therefore becomes your single view of the truth, then everything you do from a sort of product strategy, brand marketing, content, promotional strategy revolves around that and is driven by the intent that comes from that and the data and insight that you derive from that. And that in itself just does away with a lot of that debate and discussion, which tends to happen when people can have any view they like because no one can actually disprove it or show it to be invalid.
I don't know whether it's a question or a statement, actually. It's that big one, customers as data or humans? There you go.
No, it's a good one as well. And actually, it dovetails into what we were just talking about, where it's easy to collect disparate sets of data. And, marketeers, throughout the years and across all the different areas of business, ultimately they ask for investment to support a campaign or a project or an activity that they're doing in the hope that they can show an ROI model or an expectation of that return on investment, which makes sense to the finance team or the finance director, CFO, whatever. And ultimately that tension is always there, and it always is continuous. It never goes away, because all that you're doing is saying, give me £1,000 here and I'll show you the value of that £1,000 over here as 8,000 or 9,000 or 10,000 or 15,000 if you're really lucky. But what that generally does is it forces marketeers to look at the data coming out of that activity as a set of data, and normally data points and not actual human customers. And the problem with that is you don't then connect together those people, those humans, those actual customers across multiple sets of activation, even across different touch points, or maybe elsewhere in your ecosystem if you're fortunate enough to have data shared by one of your partners or multiple partners or marketplace partners or whatever they may be, and even what you're seeing across your social channels. And depending on how close your relationship and your executive teams are with Facebook, Google, etc., drawing all of that together and looking at it over a longer time span and looking at all of those things consolidated together just invariably makes you think about customers in a much more human way. And what that tends to force people to do is it basically makes them more sophisticated about the activities that they're trying to produce. It makes them think more about the groups of people that they're trying to engage with and trying to have a longer term relationship with. And that in turn starts to make you develop much more relevant communications and mechanics with your customers. And hopefully, bearing in mind the data conversation and the structured data conversation we just had, what then flows back into the business is a much more meaningful understanding, even down to an individual customer level, of exactly what types of customer you've got and what encourages them to engage with you in what manner of ways or across which channels or touch points, full price, off price, whatever it may be. You start to really understand them as people doing people-like things in a emotional way. And what that then allows you to do is just become super smart about those that you want more of, those that you're happy to, tickle along, and those that you recognize maybe aren't as valuable to you. And you can see that very clearly. What you then also start to do is take that out to any of your third-party partners when you're looking at finding your cohort groups to, acquire new customers or, find a like-minded third party to do a development or an activation with. And it just makes much more compelling reading for the customer. But then when you start to look at the output of those activities, you just get to a point where you're much cleverer about what and how you're thinking about customers going forward.
So where does emotional loyalty come into this? Because obviously you were at Ted Baker for 24 years.
Correct.
And you've obviously used lots of marketing solutions to test emotional loyalty, drive emotional loyalty. But it is quite a big topic, and it must be quite something that's difficult to study. You don't have data on emotions. Well, maybe you do. Maybe you can tell me differently. But there's obviously the marketing solutions that you've used. So I'm interested to know the providers or the service providers, the marketing service providers, how is their technology currently driving emotional loyalty, or do these agencies have to be looking at more, and retailers have to be looking at more innovative technology to measure it?
There are key emotional behaviors which every customer falls into. I believe there are 12 groups. And one of the things we did at TED to get us to a point where we were beginning to talk about emotional loyalty is we did a mindsets project where we employed a very smart agency who had a background in behavioral economics, and they understood, the emotional triggers and the different customer types and behavioral attitudes. And we asked them to work with us to define a strategy. And we started to pick apart what we held dear as a brand, and we then went to our customers and we asked them a very smart set of questions, which gave us a very clear view of exactly what they thought about us, exactly why they engaged with the brand or didn't any longer, exactly why they used to but don't anymore or had started to come back, etc., etc. And we worked through this project to get to the point where we ended up with 3 very distinct mindsets, and we called them peacocks, gurus, and boosters. And what was really fascinating was the cohesiveness and collected detail within the 3 groups was completely age and gender agnostic. And it was very clearly showing us that product types, colors, prints, and very specific product details were the reasons that people bought products, not age or gender or where they came from, UK or US. And it was fascinating. And then we took all of that information and we did 2 things. One is we overlaid it with our core segmentation, and we started to see very clear pockets of very high value customers through to and including down to customers who only ever shop with us in the sale, but still spent a lot of money, so weren't invaluable, but were different valuable. And we then built out a global ambassadors program where we invited all of these people to be part of TED's special group, where we would go to them and we would use them as a sounding board for things that we thought strongly about. And we could see very clearly via the first responses, but the continual follow-up responses, that emotional loyalty and the feelings and the sentiment that they had for the brand and the products and services that we did feel strongly about. And they told us very clearly what they felt about things that we were a bit nervous about. So it was a fantastic exercise, but it really did show that there is a genuine emotional loyalty in a large swathe of customers. What you then do with that, how you then engender that in additional groups, and how you then deploy that in the language you use, the visual articulation you use of the brand, the product development, the product photography, and how you then use that to target the specific groups that you're trying to acquire or you're trying to re-engage or trying to reactivate, just made us so much smarter. And all of that was not technology dependent. What's important is to work out as a business what it is you think you need, why you think it's important, and what success looks like at the end of a project. And then if you need to, you then go out to market, or you go to, a certain group of vendors, and you find a technology or a software solution which actually does what you need it to do, but you've already worked out what that is. A lot of people fall into the trap of being excited by a sexy new piece of technology or a solution, instead of really understanding where it fits into the ecosystem, or what is it the problem they're trying to solve, or do they even understand that they've got challenges. And those things are really important, I think. So you get the right people around the table, you talk about stuff, you talk about it until everyone's very clear about what you're trying to do, and then you work out what you need to make that come to fruition. And it's a fascinating project.